The demolition order hit my cabin door at exactly 6:47 a.m., signed in Victoria Harrington's perfect script. 3 squad cars were already blocking my driveway, their red and blue lights painting Pine Ridge Lake like a crime scene from hell. Illegal structure. She'd written, public safety hazard. 48 hours for voluntary compliance. Victoria stood beside her pristine Mercedes, filming everything with her phone, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. The morning sun caught her platinum hair as she directed the scene like a movie producer, complete with a man carrying an official-looking clipboard and another with an expensive camera. What she didn't know was that in exactly 6 hours, I'd be wearing judicial robes in courtroom 4B, holding the power to decide her fate. And what she really didn't know: the illegal cabin she was trying to steal sat on land my family had owned since before her great-grandfather was born. But first, let me tell you how a simple property dispute became the most expensive mistake of her life. By the time this story ends, Victoria Harrington will lose a $20 million development deal, face federal charges, and discover that the helpless old man she tried to destroy owns the very ground her mansion sits on. I know some of you watching have dealt with HOA nightmares of your own. Drop a comment about the craziest power trip you've witnessed. Because trust me, this story will make your experiences look like practice rounds. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. Pine Ridge Lake, Colorado, population 847. The kind of place where million-dollar vacation homes crowd against century-old fishing cabins, and money talks louder than sense. My cabin, Catherine's cabin really, had been our refuge for 12 years. Simple wood and stone. Nothing fancy. But it overlooked the exact spot where I'd proposed, where we'd scattered her mother's ashes, where Catherine took her last breath 2 years ago in my arms. Environmental cancer, caused by industrial runoff that was supposed to be cleaned up 20 years ago. The doctors couldn't explain why a healthy environmental scientist would develop such an aggressive form of the disease, but Catherine had her suspicions. She'd been documenting water quality issues around the lake for months before her diagnosis, taking samples, running tests, building a case that she never got to finish. Victoria Harrington ruled Pine Ridge like a queen commanding peasants. HOA president for 6 years running, city planning committee member, wife of the county's biggest commercial developer. Her family's real estate empire stretched back 3 generations. But whispers said they were leveraged to the breaking point, desperate for one massive score to save everything. That score had a name: Meridian Shores Resort. A $100 million lakefront development that would transform Pine Ridge into Aspen's little sister. Luxury suites, championship golf course, private marina, the works. There was just one problem. My cabin sat exactly where the resort's main lodge was planned. The morning started peaceful enough, coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. Catherine's favorite time of day. I could almost hear her laugh echoing across the water, the way it used to when she'd spot an eagle diving for fish or catch me burning breakfast again. Then I heard it, the click of designer heels on gravel. Getting closer. Victoria emerged from the tree line like a perfectly dressed predator, flanked by a man with a clipboard and another with an expensive camera. Every step was calculated, purposeful. The walk of someone who'd never heard the word no and didn't plan to start today. Mr. Thornfield, she called out, her voice carrying the kind of authority that expected immediate compliance. We need to discuss your situation. I set my coffee down slowly, taking my time to study this woman who'd invaded my morning peace. Everything about Victoria screamed money and control, from her perfectly manicured nails to the diamond earrings catching the morning light. Her smile reminded me of a shark scenting blood in the water. Miss Harrington, I presume. And what situation would that be? Victoria's smile could have frozen the lake solid. I'm here in my official capacity as HOA president to inform you of multiple violations that require immediate attention. She gestured to the man with the clipboard like she was presenting evidence in court. Thomas Ashford, certified building inspector. He's documented 17 separate code violations that make this structure uninhabitable. Thomas stepped forward, nervous sweat already beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Unpermitted dock extension, non-conforming septic system, illegal water access points, substandard electrical work, Improper foundation setbacks. He rattled off violations like he was reading grocery items. His voice gaining confidence with each accusation. I leaned back in my deck chair, studying Thomas with the same attention I'd give a witness whose testimony didn't quite add up. Thomas, isn't it? And where exactly did you get your certification? The clipboard trembled slightly in his hands. That is, Colorado State Building Authority. Interesting. I kept my voice calm, conversational, because I don't see your license number on this report. State law requires all inspection documents to include valid certification numbers. Victoria's slight flinch told me everything I needed to know about Mr. Ashford's qualifications. But she recovered quickly, stepping forward to reclaim control of the conversation. Mr. Thornfield, let's not get bogged down in paperwork. The community has voted. This eyesore affects everyone's property values. She gestured dismissively at my cabin like it was something that had washed up on shore, a ramshackle cabin in a luxury residential area. Surely you understand the incongruity. Eyesore? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Carrying 2 years of grief and frustration, this cabin has been here since 1987. Miss Harrington, long before your HOA existed. Ancient history. New regulations supersede old arrangements. Victoria pulled out her phone, waving it like a weapon. I have friends at every level of local government. Code enforcement. Planning commission. County assessor. If you choose to fight this, I will make your life very, very complicated. The camera operator moved closer, getting a close-up of my face like they were building evidence for something bigger. I realized this wasn't just intimidation, it was documentation. Victoria was creating a record that would support whatever legal action she had planned. Have you researched the property records thoroughly? I asked quietly. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Uncertainty? Fear? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. But after 18 years on the bench, you learn to read micro-expressions like a book. Thoroughly enough, you have 48 hours to begin voluntary demolition, or I'll be forced to pursue legal remedies. Legal remedies. I couldn't help but smile at that phrase. Miss Harrington, I think you're going to find that legal remedies work both ways. Victoria's confident mask slipped for just a moment as she registered something unsettling in my tone. She recovered quickly, but not before I saw genuine concern flash across her features. Whatever research she'd done, it hadn't been thorough enough. 48 hours. Mr. Thornfield, I suggest you use them wisely. She turned on her heel and stalked back toward the road, her entourage scrambling to keep up. As their vehicles disappeared around the bend, I remained on my deck, finishing my coffee and thinking about legal remedies. Victoria had no idea what she'd just walked into, but she was about to get a very expensive education. Ruth Blackwood appeared like clockwork at 8 a.m., coffee thermos in hand, ready for our daily catch-up. At 67, Ruth had the sharp eyes of a librarian and the long memory of a true local. She'd been my anchor these past 2 years, and the kind of friend who shows up without being asked and somehow always knows exactly what you need to hear. Danny boy, what was all that commotion earlier? Looked like Victoria was holding court. Ruth settled into the chair beside mine, pouring coffee from her thermos with the practiced ease of someone who'd perfected the morning ritual. I showed her the demolition notice, watching her expression harden as she read Victoria's demands. That woman, she's been systematically targeting every pre-2000 cabin on this lake. Yours is just the biggest prize. What do you mean? Systematically? Ruth opened her ever-present messenger bag and pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've been doing research. Danny, the Harrington family is in serious financial trouble. Their company owes $17 million to creditors, and the bank's threatening foreclosure. She spread printouts across my kitchen table, revealing a complex web of shell companies, property transfers, and legal maneuvers that would have impressed a federal prosecutor. Look at this pattern. 12 cabins in the past 18 months, all targeted for violations, all sold to shell companies owned by, guess who? The paper trail was damning. Harrington Development Group had been using the HOA as a weapon to acquire property at below-market prices, then flipping those properties to mysterious buyers who all traced back to the same family business. Danny, they're not just trying to get your cabin, They're trying to get your land. The environmental impact studies for Meridian Shores show they need at least 40 acres of lakefront for the resort foundation. Ruth pulled out another folder. This one containing official-looking documents with government seals. There's something else. The EPA has been quietly investigating industrial contamination around the lake. Something about illegal dumping that dates back decades. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Illegal dumping. Ruth, what kind of contamination? Heavy metals, chemical solvents, industrial waste. The kind that causes environmental cancers. Her voice softened as she saw understanding dawn in my eyes. Catherine's cancer wasn't random. Was it? Ruth's expression confirmed my worst fear. I've been afraid to tell you. But there are 17 other cases in the past decade. All lakefront residents. All the same rare cancer type that took Catherine. The coffee mug felt heavy in my hands as the implications sank in. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about justice for Catherine and everyone else who'd suffered while the Harrington family profited from their silence. The Harrington family knows about the contamination? Worse, they caused it. Their company ran the chemical plant upriver for 30 years before environmental regulations forced them into real estate. Ruth's research was thorough, documenting 3 decades of violations, cover-ups, and regulatory capture that would have made an investigative journalist weep with joy. Danny, there's something else you should know. I pulled the county records going back to 1892. Your family's land grants. They're not just for your cabin lot. I looked at her sharply. What do you mean? I mean the Thornfield Family Trust owns a lot more than you might realize. Your great-grandfather was quite the strategic investor during the Great Depression. That afternoon, I did what any good judge does when facing a complex case. Research everything. Ruth's discovery had opened a door I'd never thought to walk through. And what I found on the other side made my pulse quicken. The county land records told a fascinating story. My great-grandfather, Judge William Thornfield, had been more than just a small-town jurist. He'd been a visionary who understood that protecting the environment meant controlling the land around it. Original deeds. Mineral rights. Water access agreements dating back to territorial days painted a picture of careful, methodical acquisition, spanning nearly a century. The Thornfield Family Trust didn't just own my cabin. It owned the mineral rights to 60% of Pine Ridge Lake, the water access rights to the entire eastern shore, and something called historical preservation easements that prevented any commercial development without trust approval. Those easements specifically mentioned protection against industrial contamination and commercial exploitation. Great-grandfather had been protecting this lake for almost a century, as if he'd foreseen exactly what the Harrington family would try to do. But the most interesting discovery was buried in a 1987 legal filing. Victoria's family had tried this exact same scheme 35 years ago. My father, Judge Robert Thornfield, had shut them down then, using the same trust documents and preservation easements that were about to destroy their plans again. The Harringtons were nothing if not persistent. 3 generations of judges, 3 generations of attempted land grabs. They'd been waiting for the Thornfield family to forget their own power, to become complacent enough that history could repeat itself. I made 3 phone calls that afternoon. First, my clerk Jennifer, clear my docket for tomorrow. Emergency hearing required. Second, EPA agent Lisa Park, Catherine's old colleague from her environmental consulting days. We need to discuss lake contamination and criminal negligence. Third, county records. I need certified copies of all Thornfield Trust documents. Priority rush. By evening, I had enough evidence to destroy Victoria's scheme and her family's business. But I also had something else. Proof that the contamination that killed Catherine was deliberate criminal negligence, not the unfortunate accident the family had claimed for decades. Victoria called that evening, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. Mr. Thornfield, I hope you've had time to consider the generous relocation offer. My associates are prepared to pay fair market value plus moving expenses. Associates? Meridian Development Group. They're very interested in preserving the natural beauty of Pine Ridge. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife, preserving it by paving it over with luxury accommodations. Miss Harrington, I appreciate the offer, but this property isn't for sale. Her voice turned cold. the mask of politeness finally slipping completely. Then I'm afraid you've chosen the difficult path. Tomorrow morning, you'll receive formal legal notice. My attorney is very thorough. Miss Harrington, may I ask which court you'll be filing in? County Court. Naturally. Judge Morrison handles all property disputes. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Actually, Judge Morrison is on medical leave. I believe all emergency property cases are being handled by the senior judge. Silence stretched across the line like a taut wire. And who might that be? You'll find out tomorrow. Have a pleasant evening. Miss Harrington. What Victoria didn't know was that I'd just given her enough rope to hang herself and her entire family business. In 12 hours, she'd walk into my courtroom expecting to face a helpless old man. Instead, she'd discover that some legal remedies cut both ways, and that the law has a long memory for families who think they're above it. The trap was set. All that remained was watching it spring. Thursday, 9:00 a.m., County Courthouse, Room 4B. Victoria arrived like a general leading an army into battle, 3 lawyers in $1,000 suits, a briefcase-carrying assistant, and Gregory Harrington himself. They commanded the courtroom with expensive confidence, spreading documents across the plaintiff's table like they owned the building. Victoria wore courtroom armor, navy power suit, pearl earrings, a smile that said she'd already won. Her legal team had clearly prepared for a slam-dunk case against an unrepresented elderly defendant. This should be simple. I heard her whisper to her lead attorney. Marcus Webb, small-town judge, elderly defendant, clear code violations, open and shut. She was right about one thing. It would be open and shut. At 9:15 a.m., the bailiff entered with practiced authority. All rise for the Honorable Judge Daniel Thornfield. I watched Victoria's face as I walked through the door in judicial robes, took my seat behind the bench, and looked down at her with calm authority. The transformation was instant and electric. Confidence became confusion. Control became panic. Predator became prey. The color drained from Victoria's face like someone had pulled a plug. Gregory Harrington's expensive pen clattered to the table. Marcus Webb's mouth actually fell open, destroying his carefully cultivated courtroom composure. Good morning. Court is now in session. Case number 2024 CV 3847. Harrington versus Thornfield. Emergency hearing on plaintiff's motion for immediate property seizure. Victoria's lead attorney recovered first, his expensive training kicking in, despite the obvious shock. Your Honor, I move for immediate recusal based on obvious conflict of interest. Mr. Webb. The plaintiff specifically requested emergency judicial intervention. Since this is your client's emergency, I see no reason to delay justice. I leaned forward slightly, bringing the full weight of judicial authority to bear. Furthermore, conflict of interest applies when a judge has a financial stake in the outcome. Are you suggesting this court would benefit financially from this case? Well, no, Your Honor, but the defendant is. Then let's proceed. Miss Harrington, please state your grievances for the record. Victoria stood slowly, her perfect composure cracking like ice under pressure. The woman who'd terrorized property owners across Pine Ridge for 6 years suddenly looked very small in my courtroom. Your Honor, the defendant's structure violates 17 municipal codes and poses a clear danger to community safety. Interesting. Have you submitted the required environmental impact assessment? Environmental assessment? Miss Harrington, any claim of community danger requires professional environmental evaluation. Do you have such documentation? The silence stretched like a taut wire. Victoria looked to her lawyers, who suddenly found their documents fascinating. Gregory Harrington was frantically shuffling papers, looking for something that didn't exist. Perhaps we should discuss your qualifications to determine environmental safety. Miss Harrington, what followed was a masterclass in legal precision and controlled fury. Every question I asked was designed to expose another layer of Victoria's fraudulent case, and she fell deeper into the trap with each answer. Miss Harrington, you claim my property violates HOA covenants. Have you reviewed the actual HOA boundaries as recorded with the county? Of course. Your Honor, I produced a document that made her face go white. This is the original 1987 HOA incorporation filing. Your property is included. Mine is specifically excluded. That's impossible. Miss Harrington, are you suggesting this court's records are falsified? The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, transfixed by the systematic destruction of what should have been a simple property grab. Furthermore, your certified building inspector, Mr. Thomas Ashford. I looked directly at the man who'd been so confident on my deck yesterday morning. Mr. Ashford, please stand. Thomas rose on shaking legs. Sweat, now streaming down his face despite the courthouse air conditioning. Mr. Ashford, please provide your Colorado certification number for the record. Your Honor. Mr. Ashford has no certification. He's Victoria's cousin and a part-time handyman. Miss Harrington, you've submitted fraudulent documentation to this court. Victoria's remaining color drained completely away. Her expensive legal team was scrambling through papers, trying to find some way to salvage a case that was imploding in real time. But let's discuss the real issue here: environmental contamination. If Victoria had looked pale before, she now resembled a ghost. Gregory Harrington actually pushed his chair back from the table, as if proximity to his sister might contaminate him with legal liability. Miss Harrington, are you familiar with the EPA's ongoing investigation into historical chemical dumping around Pine Ridge Lake? I have no knowledge of your family's chemical plant, the one that operated illegally for 30 years before being shut down for environmental violations. I opened a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. The plant that dumped industrial waste directly into the lake that killed my wife and 17 other residents? The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispered conversations. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. It was a public exposure of decades of criminal negligence. Miss Harrington, since you're so concerned about property ownership and rights, let me educate you about the Thornfield Family Trust. I spread documents across my bench where everyone could see them, each one a nail in the coffin of Victoria's development dreams. Established 1892. Updated through 5 generations. Let me read the relevant holdings. Lots 23 through 67, including mineral rights. Lots 72 through 89, including water access. Historical preservation easements covering the entire eastern watershed. Development prohibition covenants preventing commercial construction within 500 feet of the original shoreline. Victoria's lawyer started shuffling papers frantically, but there was nothing in his briefcase that could counter century-old legal documents. And finally, Miss Harrington. I paused for maximum effect, watching as understanding dawned in her eyes. Lot 45, where your mansion currently sits, along with the underlying mineral rights and all development permissions. The gasps from the gallery were audible. Gregory Harrington's phone hit the floor with a crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. You don't own your land. Miss Harrington, you lease it from the Thornfield Family Trust. And according to the lease terms, any attempt to develop the surrounding area constitutes breach of contract. The courtroom was dead silent, except for the sound of Victoria's world collapsing around her. Let me be clear about what this means. Your $20 million development deal? Void? Your HOA authority over trust property? Non-existent? Your lease on the mansion? Subject to immediate termination for fraudulent legal action. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. This is impossible. Our family has owned, your family has leased, Miss Harrington, for 37 years. And the lease specifically prohibits industrial development or environmental contamination. Gregory Harrington was frantically calculating on his phone, his face growing paler with each number. That's approximately $12 million in back penalties. But we're not just talking about civil matters. Miss Harrington, environmental contamination that causes death is a federal crime. I nodded to the back of the courtroom, where Agent Lisa Park had been waiting for this exact moment. Agent Lisa Park, EPA Criminal Investigation Division. She's been building a case against Harrington Chemical for 3 years. Agent Park stood, badge clearly visible, flanked by 2 other federal agents who'd entered quietly during the proceedings. Based on evidence presented in this hearing, we have sufficient cause for arrest. Victoria Harrington. Gregory Harrington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit environmental terrorism, fraud, and accessory to negligent homicide. Victoria looked around the courtroom like a trapped animal, searching for allies who were suddenly nowhere to be found. Her expensive legal team was already distancing themselves, pulling back from the table like she was radioactive. You can't do this. We have connections. Political protection. Miss Harrington, in your connections just witnessed, you commit perjury in a federal investigation. I don't think they'll be returning your calls. The arrests were swift and professional. Victoria maintained her composure until the handcuffs clicked shut. Then she turned back with pure fury burning in her eyes. This isn't over. Thornfield. My family built this community. We have resources you can't imagine. Victoria. Your family poisoned this community. And they killed my wife doing it. The only resource you have now is the right to remain silent. As federal agents led the Harringtons away, the courtroom erupted in whispered conversations. Word would spread fast in a town of 847 people. And by evening, everyone would know that the family that had ruled Pine Ridge for decades was finally facing justice. Ruth appeared at my side, grinning like she'd won the lottery. Danny boy. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in 40 years of small-town drama. By evening, my phone was ringing non-stop. Other lake residents, other victims, people who'd been too afraid to challenge the Harrington empire, they were ready to tell their stories now. I'm ready to join a fight they finally believed they could win. Agent Park's investigation moved quickly once Victoria's arrest opened the floodgates. Judge Thornfield, we've been building this case since your wife's death. Her environmental reports were what first caught our attention. Catherine had known, in her final months, she'd been documenting contamination patterns, cancer clusters, everything that would eventually bring down the Harringtons. She'd left detailed notes, water samples, medical records, chemical analysis. She was building a case even while she was dying. She knew she wouldn't live to see it through. Agent Park continued, but she made sure we had everything we needed to continue her work. The EPA investigation expanded rapidly. Harrington Chemical faced $50 million in fines, environmental cleanup costs that would bankrupt the company, 17 executives charged with criminal negligence. A medical fund was established with $200 million for victims' families. Pine Ridge Lake became a federal Superfund site, protected permanently from development. Catherine's Lake, preserved forever just as she dreamed. 6 months later, I stood on my deck watching the sunrise paint the water gold. The lake was healing. Fish populations were returning. Water clarity improving daily. The EPA had worked miracles with their cleanup efforts. Ruth joined me for coffee. Our morning ritual restored to its peaceful rhythm. Any regrets? Danny? About how it all went down? I thought about Victoria, serving federal time in Colorado. About Gregory, facing bankruptcy proceedings and criminal charges. About their family empire, dismantled piece by piece by the very system they'd tried to corrupt. Ruth, Catherine always said justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the same harm can't happen again. Victoria thought she was stealing my cabin. She never realized she was destroying herself against something much bigger than property. I raised my coffee mug toward the water, where an eagle was diving for fish in the crystal-clear depths. To Catherine, and to a lake that will never be poisoned again. The morning was peaceful. Coffee on the deck, watching sunrise paint Pine Ridge Lake in shades of gold, just the way Catherine would have wanted it. Sometimes people ask me if I went too far, if using my position as a judge gave me an unfair advantage. Here's what I tell them. Victoria Harrington came to my home and threatened to destroy everything my dying wife had asked me to protect. She represented a system that profits from poisoning communities and silencing victims. I didn't abuse my power. I finally used it correctly. The thing about bullies, especially ones who hide behind lawyers and political connections, is they're only powerful until someone with greater power decides to stop them. Catherine always said the law exists to protect people who can't protect themselves. Sometimes that takes a judge who remembers why he took the oath. I know many of you watching have dealt with HOA nightmares, corrupt officials, or environmental injustice in your own communities. The comments section on these videos always amazes me with stories of neighbors who stood up, officials who got exposed, systems that finally worked when good people refused to stay silent. Share your story if you're comfortable. Not just the problems you faced, but how you fought back. Or if you're facing something now, describe what you're up against. You'd be surprised how many people in similar situations find each other through these comments. Sometimes that's the beginning of real change. Speaking of environmental justice and corrupt officials, next week I'm telling you about the city council member who tried to shut down a veteran's organic farm to make room for a chemical plant. What she didn't know? That veteran was a retired Army Corps of Engineers colonel who specialized in environmental warfare. Trust me, you won't want to miss how creative a military engineer can get when someone threatens his tomatoes. Sometimes the best battles are won before anyone realizes they've even started fighting. And this particular war involved tactics that would make Sunday Tzu proud.